Who is Sanat Kumara? This is an excerpt from 21 Essential Lessons compiled by Werner Schroeder from the Bridge to Freedom material. Let us be ever grateful to and remember the service given by Sanat Kumara, one of the greatest friends the earth has ever known. Once the laggards were brought to earth, mankind started its downward trend. The local mist, referred to in Genesis, caused by the laggards became a total veil, generated when most of mankind tuned into thought forms of misqualified energy and produced some of their own. This downward trend continued until the earth reached such a low point that it became a concern of the hierarchy of this galaxy. Cosmic law demands that any planet carry a certain amount of light, which is harmoniously and constructively qualified energy, by its inhabitants, as a condition of maintaining its place in a solar system. About 4.5 million years ago, during the Lemurian Age, the Earth fell short on the following counts. Firstly, it did not emit sufficient constructive radiation. Secondly, it did not contribute sufficiently to the music of the galaxy or the music of the spheres. Its rotating axis was tilted to 45 degrees. If the degree of inclination would have increased, it would have been disastrous. In 1998, the tilt had corrected itself to about 23 degrees. Number 4, the guardian spirits cannot stay indefinitely on a planet. They must return to their own planets, their natural sphere of activity. Their place must be taken by the natural life streams of the Earth, and this had not occurred. The first 3 root races had ascended, but out of these millions of life streams, not a single individual contributed in any manner to the succeeding races. All of these individuals chose to progress at inner levels and thereby elected not to assist the inhabitants of the Earth. Number 5, man descended into a state known as the caveman. Even the knowledge of how to make a simple fire became forgotten, and the age of the dinosaurs prevailed. Number 6, the spark in the heart of the individual, which maintains his life and which anchors the I am presence, had shrunken to 1/16 of an inch. And number 7, the nature kingdom revolted and refused to bring forth any new foliage for mankind, so full of discord and lack of appreciation for their services. Against the backdrop of these alarming developments, Helios and Vesta were required to attend a cosmic council. The council was attended by representatives of the galaxy, of which the Earth is a part, as well as representatives of other galaxies. The conference was chaired by Alpha and Omega, who are responsible for our galaxy. After considering all pertinent factors, a proposal was made to write off the Earth as a useless experience. As part of this plan, the Earth would have been swung off its axis, thereby dissolving it. This would have meant the end of the opportunity for all life to use the Earth as a vehicle for self-expression and growth. Sanat Kumara, an ascended being from the planet Venus and one of its regents, at this point suggested that if an ascended being with sufficient light chose to remain in the atmosphere of the Earth and offer their light as a balance for the light quota lacking on Earth, the Earth might be saved. This ascended being would have to stay on the Earth until a worthy successor could be found, and the Earth would again emit sufficient light. Archangel Raphael agreed and asked for volunteers. Sanat Kumara indicated he would be interested, provided that his twin flame, Lady Venus, the other co-regent of the planet Venus, would consent. Venus subsequently agreed, and this freed Sanat Kumara to proceed with his mission. It was stated to the students in the 1950s that Sanat Kumara had fulfilled similar missions before, each time returning home victorious. From this account, it is reasonable to assume that a similar fall of man has also taken place on other planets. Sanat Kumara is known as the Ancient of Days in the Old Testament. The preparation for Shambhala. After returning to his home star Venus, Sanat Kumara made the announcement of his offer to his people. Inspired by his example of selfless love, 30 priests from the planet Venus offered to precede him to prepare a place for him. They imprinted into their memory the city of Shambhala on Venus, which was to serve as a model for Sanat Kumara's home on earth. Then they bade goodbye to their friends, their home and their planet, and stood before the Lords of Karma on the earth. This great council accepted the offer of the volunteers with great gratitude. There were no special privileges accorded to these priests. They were bound by the law of the earth, including the wheel of re-embodiment, and each one was to understand that he had to share Sanat Kumara's destiny. Namely, none would be released until the hour came when the earth's own light was sufficient to meet the demand of the cosmic law. They were not granted the privilege of consecutive consciousness and had to submit to the bands of forgetfulness, an act of mercy which applies to all unascended life streams of the earth. Were it not for this act of mercy, mankind would be troubled with the memory of thousands of embodiments, which, according to the masters, would give us too much to handle at one time. Therefore, all that was left of the memory of Venus was the imprint on the etheric bodies of the picture of Shambhala as it existed on Venus, or the promptings from their hearts. There was to be no master showing them the way on earth, and no outer assistance was given. When the priests awoke in infant form, they looked the same as any other individual on earth at that time. They were born in different countries. Some were born in North America. After they reached adulthood, the former priests of Venus followed their heart's promptings, causing some to leave their families. Those living in the area today called the United States of America gathered near what is now called New York City. They had one thing in common, an inner memory of a shining city. They crossed several great seas and continents. Some of the former priests finally gathered on the mainland, close to the Gobi Sea, a large body of water, which is now known as the Gobi Desert. Many had experienced a wearisome journey, but a burning desire lighted their way and let them remember their purpose sufficiently to find their pilgrim brothers. After arriving, the strongest among them brought forth a vision of their purpose, and it was confirmed in the hearts of others. Thus started the preparation of what is known as the building of Shambhala. Let us pause for a moment here to reflect upon some of the details which the Ascended Masters gave us on the topography of the earth at that time. This was 4.5 million years ago. According to one dictation, the present Gobi Desert was a large inland sea, and its sapphire blue waters dashed against the Himalayan mountains. Another dictation speaks of swiftly moving waters. This suggests that the large body of water, called the Gobi Sea, had at least one inlet and one outlet. There were hills not too far from the Gobi Sea, occupied by savage members of the human race. They were the laggards. There is evidence that at one time there was indeed a Gobi Sea. A geologist, Professor Ray Winkle, stated that the territory, now known as the Gobi Desert, was at one time a large inland lake, as large as the Mediterranean Sea. The dictation which told of the priests starting out from the United States mentioned that they had to cross several great seas and continents, and several other dictations suggest that from the beginning of time there were always several continents above water. Cosmic law tends to support this view. The overcrowding of this planet, caused by allowing billions of laggards to occupy it, makes it mandatory for the cosmic lords to continually find new opportunities for unascended life streams to redeem their karma. Therefore, large amounts of land have to be above water on a continual basis. The building of Shambhala. Within the Gobi Sea, there was an island with lush green foliage, upon which it was decided to build Shambhala. This island was called the White Island. Drawn together by the bonds of common interests in one cause, the next task of the 30 volunteers was to find the material of which Shambhala was to be built, and by the labor of their own hands design and build from marble and stone the vision which they held within their minds. Conditions were similar to those encountered today. There was no special assistance given to these individuals. There was a veil, and there was no coming and going of visible angelic beings. From all over the world they carried by the sweat of the brow, and not in mystic chariot, all the tremendous pieces of marble and the various other heavy stones that formed the mighty edifices. They used the most beautiful materials the earth could offer. Some among them, who were powerful in the use of magnetization, helped them in the erecting of some of these stones, weighing tons. The latter statement may be of significance. Did these priests, who had the power of levitating stones, later embody in Egypt and assist in building the Great Pyramid at Giza? Many have wondered how man could place single stones weighing 20 tons each to positions of great elevation with such precision that one could hardly fit a razor blade between the joints. The masters stated the early pyramids were built by the power of levitation. Continuing the account of the masters in the building of Shambhala, the first task of the priests was to build a beautiful bridge connecting the mainland with the island. It was carved from the finest marble, ingrained with pure gold, and contained exquisite figures of cherubim. Adjacent to the bridge on White Island was a tree-lined avenue which led to the main temple, which was to be Sanat Kumara's residence. The main temple was built upon the highest point of the city. There were marble steps leading to it, broken by grassy terraces placed at intervals of about every 12 steps. These terraces were adorned with gaily coloured flowers and rainbow-hued fountains. The great door of the temple was of a tremendous height. Its golden filigree work reflected the sun like a gigantic mirror. The main temple itself, as well as the remainder of the city, was built using white marble, hence the names White Island and City of White. The temple for Sanat Kumara looked similar to the Taj Mahal of modern times. White minarets of the city pointed heavenward, and its golden domed temples gave the impression of a gigantic fire lotus suspended in the atmosphere. Lovely fountains adorned the front of the building. Shambhala was not built all at once. Construction was frequently interrupted by destructive hordes who came down from the hills, killed the builders, and destroyed their work. As soon as their physical bodies were disconnected from their etheric bodies, their souls, they applied again to be quickly provided with the opportunity for new embodiment. This request was always granted. Undauntedly, for 900 years, the builders of Shambhala continued their service of love, brushed away the rubble and started anew, sometimes even having to rebuild the very foundation of the temple. Sanat Kumara enters Shambhala. One day, working against time, there was a cosmic moment beyond which the cosmic law would not allow the earth any more energy, and Sanat Kumara would have to come whether Shambhala was completed or not. The city was finished. The Lemurian pole star, which apparently fulfilled a function similar to today's North Star, was at its zenith, signifying this cosmic moment, and Sanat Kumara, accompanied by 3 other Kumaras from Venus, entered his residence. Happy and grateful were the builders, who had endured the 900 years of effort to complete Shambhala, a place so magnificent that the like of it has never been equalled at any time on earth. They knelt in thanksgiving and appreciation before God and Sanat Kumara, thus forming an etheric record. Thousands of years later, pilgrims entering the United States tuned into these etheric records in establishing Thanksgiving Day. After arriving at Shambhala, Sanat Kumara drew forth the immortal threefold flame of God. The concentration of that flame had never been known on the earth before, because it represented the vibratory action of the planet Venus. A tiny thread of this flame was anchored into the heart of each of the 10 billion life streams evolving on the earth, both into those in embodiment and those out of embodiment. The crisis passed and the earth was saved. The forming of the Great White Brotherhood. Next, a way and means had to be devised, whereby the natural children of the earth and their pledged guardian spirits might be awakened to their own responsibility. It was required of them to create an aura of light for their planet, and to satisfy cosmic law, and to allow Sanat Kumara to return to his home star. Sanat Kumara prepared for this by founding the Great White Brotherhood, a united inner group of ascended beings. The service of the spiritual order was to teach interested students cosmic law and to eventually draw them into the Brotherhood. This way they would be prepared to assume at some future point, responsibilities and positions held by volunteers from other planets. The Great White Brotherhood is comprised of ascended beings who are all specialists along some particular line of spiritual service and endeavor. Their goal is to set the earth and its evolutions free. Members of the Great White Brotherhood live only to serve God. The first two of Earth's life streams to respond were Lord Gautama Buddha and Lord Maitreya. From this small beginning, the Brotherhood has gained in strength and numbers through the centuries. After Sanat Kumara arrived, a priest of the Order of Zarathustra returned to mankind the knowledge of the physical fire. Previous to the coming of Sanat Kumara, there were ages when only 3 people held the connection from the earth to the divine realm, and at one time there was only 1 person. That connection held the earth in its orbit. So it was that Shambhala was completed in 3 different time intervals. Once or twice it was destroyed in cataclysmic action. According to a dictation from the Ascended Masters, remnants of this bridge to White Island may now still be found under the shifting sands of the Gobi Desert. The desert was formed as a result of cataclysmic action, during which the Gobi Sea was changed to a desert. When the physical buildings of Shambhala were destroyed, an etheric counterpart of Shambhala was created above it. Sanat Kumara stayed in this etheric retreat until 1956. When he was able to return to Venus through the efforts of students of the Bridge to Freedom. These students, through voluntary application of the law, had increased the light quota of the earth by constructively qualifying energy. This way, they created the necessary conditions for Sanat Kumara's return. Let us be ever grateful and remember this great service given to the earth by Sanat Kumara. The Great Sacrifice of Sanat Kumara. This is an account by Beloved Moira from the Bridge to Freedom material. What consciousness would stand at the fall of every golden age before the karmic board and say, I renew my vow, I shall remain, they will yet arise, they will yet emit light. The karmic board more than once counselled him to linger no longer, that the mercy of the law had exhausted itself, and that divine justice would no longer accept a sacrifice of such tremendous proportions of love without parallel. I have stood there, you have stood there, as this great dignified Lord of life quietly and firmly said, I shall remain. Then the light of Venus dimmed in his eyes, and the thoughts of home receded from his sweet consciousness, lest the very pull of that love would weaken his resolve. I have stood on Venus, by the side of Sanat Kumara's beloved. I have seen her filled with increasing hope, as the hour of his exile neared completion, and then I have seen her turn, and walk back into the city of the sun, with her shoulders squared, and her eyes facing the heart of the presence, another 1,000,000 years doing the work of others. That, my children, is love. That is what fires me with enthusiasm, with determination to find among the sons and daughters of men some who would love as Venus has. That is the inspiration that has brought me to the side of Saint Germain. That is the fire that took me into the very presence of Helios and Vesta themselves, to ask for an opportunity to reach those Chelas who had served with me in many a tight corner through the ages. That is the fire that beat within my heart as I stood before the great Lord Mahachahan, and in the face of his question made me say, I believe I can find men and women to hold the bridge, to fan the dying embers of truth, to stir the souls of men, and to set this God-being free. Justice and right must prevail. Men and women who have benefited by the patience and love of Sanat Kumara, who yet refuse to serve when they know what he has done, it is outrageous. This is a crusade, my dear ones, in which my spirit, my soul, the fire of my being is invested. And before I am through, there will not be one soul on this planet who has not heard the name Sanat Kumara. There will be not one incoming soul who will not kneel before his light. I ask the Lords of Karma to withhold a physical body from any life stream who is to come through the gates of birth until that soul agrees to use its energy to emit the light which sets that great being free. I am a man of determination and purpose. It is the will of God that the men and women of earth give forth the light to make the star shine. At inner levels it is a disgrace to look upon the sweet earth, to hear its cry, to hear it groan upon its axis, and to witness the effluvia from the hearts of men that the blessed elementals are forced to clean up. Come forth now, my friends, and let us be about our Father's business. I thank you. From Beloved Elmira. Sanat Kumara returned to Venus, his home planet, and was released from his millions of years of self-chosen exile in January 1956. He temporarily returned again to help Saint Germain in the 1980s and is currently in embodiment to bring humanity a great gift and lift the curse of Cain. The curse of Cain was the effect of our misuse of life and light from our I Am Presence, which caused the loss of the use of the light rays. We turned away from the light and gave our attention and power to the outside world and lost the ability to precipitate through our I Am Presence all we need from the universal light substance which is ever present. We began to sweat at the brow for supply. This is now to end, and we are again to turn to the ways of light and live according to the immutable universal laws of life.